Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, wherever you in the world, it is your Lore Saviour. And today we are going to have a very brief look at the very first adventure released by White Wolf Publishing under its new aegis as White Wolf, because you may remember that World of Darkness as a brand is no more, and it's now White Wolf Publishing again. And Renegade Game Studios, the developers and publishers of materials, have a scheme known as Play Renegade, where you can sign up and receive adventures, one-shots, etc. for their multiple games to run at conventions, local stores and those sorts of things, and there's some point prize things, bollocks for it. Now, I'm not a part of that, but I have a friend who does do that, and they recently sent me a copy of the latest adventure for that, under Season 5 I think it is, and I've read the adventure, and I think it's pretty bland with some very interesting and technically incorrect choices that have been made, or things that I don't exactly agree with. But the reason why that we're covering what I feel to be such a bland adventure is because it actually does something I have never seen in a World of Darkness product before, which kind of means it needs to be talked about and, I dare say, celebrated, if only for about 5 seconds, because, as I've already alluded to and outright defined, this isn't a fantastic adventure. And it's that this adventure, Under a Changing Moon, is an adventure for Vampire the Masquerade or Werewolf the Apocalypse. Not for both, so it's not Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse. It's or. Now that might sound a bit familiar to you, indeed, so may the title of said adventure, because for first edition Werewolf the Apocalypse and second edition of Vampire the Masquerade, you have an adventure known as Under a Blood Red Moon, which is the War of Chicago, that infamous ransack of Chicago by the Garou that killed us some of its major key players, including the former prince. It's that big old adventure where, depending on the spat that you choose, the Garou, the Camarilla or Anarch vampires, or the Sabbat, it's going to have a very different feel to it, but it's ultimately the same story, just from a different angle, which I think makes that particular adventure really interesting. But this adventure, Under a Changing Moon, isn't that. Because what this actually is, it's the exact same story, but if you are werewolves, you go up against a cult and some vampires, and vice versa. So if you're vampires, you're going to be encountering some Garou and a cult. Which is such a wasted opportunity, I feel. Because I feel that if this could have been stretched out a bit more and expanded upon, this could have been like a proper chronicle. Or a bit of information could have been provided, like how the situation is going to change depending on the side that you're on, rather than it's literally being a copy and paste adventure. But we'll get onto that, so don't worry. And I know that some of you are going to be asking, okay, if it's the same story, doesn't that make crossplay quite straightforward? I think it does, in a sense, but as I said, we're going to talk more about the exact adventure itself, but the book actually encourages you not to do that, because it's a lot more difficult. Which, yes, that is a thing, but given how bare bones Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition is, and how everybody is going to be running this using Vampire, or I feel most people are going to be using Vampire for this because it's the far more popular splat, it wouldn't take a lot of effort, I feel, to do this as a crossing, like split them down the middle and one does theme, one does the other thing. But again, I'll touch upon what I would have done with this. But the wording of this is a bit of a cop-out, I think, and it's very frustrating that this is the attitude that they have taken. That most people are going to see this and think, oh, werewolf and vampire, because I did that. It actually took me a whole fucking day to realise it said vampire or werewolf. And the whole layout of this book seems to focus more around werewolf, from the little graphic thing I just showed you, from the colouring of the headings. Like, this seems to me more suited for Werewolf the Apocalypse than Vampire the Masquerade. To the fact I even thought it said that it was for werewolf or vampire, and they didn't do it alphabetically, but again, I misread that, and my own biases clouded my judgment. So, what is the actual premise of this adventure? Well, a MacGuffin splat thing person is after a particular talisman or artifact, a dagger that you saw on the front cover a moment ago. And this dagger does a different thing depending on the splat that you're playing, which I think is actually quite a cool thing, so there's a little bit of variety depending on the splat that you're doing. but there are some very interesting choices that have been made. Now, if you're a vampire group, what the artifact does is that it mould and bend flesh like a specific vicissitude power you can find in the player's guide, which is the only mentioning that the storyteller needs the player's guide. And I might as well talk about the characters now. They all fit under different archetypes and they're mentioned throughout the adventure. It sort of requires you to use the characters it provides, both for a Garou and a vampire group. And they all come from the core book. It's laid out nicely, unlike the previous adventures where the formatting and the placement of dots and actual fucking character creation hasn't worked properly. It does acknowledge that a bit more experience point has been spent on them just to make them a bit more bulky for the adventure, probably to make the players feel a bit more powerful. So the players can just use, what's provided in the core book. Although I will mention, it would have been nice that if the actual power descriptions were given to the players in the background, so it wasn't all down to the Games Master to do a lot of the legwork, but that's going to be a constant theme with this adventure, I feel. It requires the Games Master to have the player's guide, so they can use this one specific power, and I don't know how detailed the Paradox wiki for 5th edition stuff is on the disciplines, so they could go and look it up. But if you've got this adventure that's clearly meant to be for new players, that just has the core book material, somebody may overlook that and then realise that the MacGuffin, they're going to have to fucking make something up or look up something last minute, which I think is just a little bit fucking bad. And I know that some of you are going to boon up, but Lore, you created a 5th edition adventure called Ghost of the Chassis that requires a whole other fucking source book to use. Yeah, but I was a bit more upfront about that, given the fact it has fucking Ghost in the title, and if it's not directly mentioned on Drive4RPG/the ST Vault, you can click on the preview and then see that it requires that particular fucking source book. So, similar, but very fucking different, in my opinion. Now, the effect of the artifact is pretty cool, and I can understand why there'll be some sorcerers that may want to use this dagger as some sort of twisted wand sort of thing. That is until I tell you it's a Tzimisce sorcerer. Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense, given the fact that that particular vicissitude power, which is a protean amalgam, is a particularly low level one, so a lot of Tzimisce characters are going to have access to that. So I don't quite understand that one, to be honest. Do you not know that the Tzimisce can do that? Do you not know that players are going to, gravitate towards the vicissitude powers as your fucking flesh-shaping and crafting clan? So what does the werewolf variant of that do? Now, this one I actually think is pretty fucking cool, and it has a bit more thought put into it, which is another reason why I think this was geared towards werewolf, and then vampire was fucking slapped on last minute, because it kind of feels slapped on. It's a talisman of sorts that when you go to stab somebody, it infects them with banes or something like that. The proper description's going to be put up here. But the thing that really stands out to me about that is that it was made or found or used by a stargazer, which is the last fucking choice, outside the Children of Gaia mayhap, that would have something like this and would use something like this. I mean, you could have just used a black spiral dancer Furge. That's the most fucking obvious thing you could have done with that, but yet you decided to be a bit clever and fancy with it, or had attempted to, and now made yourself look fucking stupid, because even in 5th edition the Stargazers aren't seen as a playable tribe, because they've, fucked off from the Garou nation. They're not seen as antagonists, and they're allies, and they're not tainted by the worm in that sense. So that's just a bit fucking stupid, I feel. So your MacGuffin is a bit flawed no matter which way you're fucking looking at it, honestly. I don't know what I would do differently, but I would have an idea that I'll talk about later in the bit of this sort of rambling waffle, where I'm talking about how I would change this to incorporate both splats properly. But let's actually talk about what the adventure entails. It doesn't really matter what side you're on, because it's essentially the same thing. Some higher authority or power approaches the players to go and retrieve and destroy the MacGuffin. And they have to infiltrate a tower, like a big old abandoned building sort of thing, to find it, claim it, destroy it, whatever, depending on what the players do with it, and the splat in question, they're going to get rewarded someplace somehow. And I think the awards are far more interesting as vampire players, honestly. And then it sort of lets the players go ham at it. And I say that because the book does mention, well, booklet, I guess, it's 60 pages, most of which are taken up by the character sheets, because the adventure itself is pretty fucking short, at least to read. I have not run it, and quite frankly, I don't want to. It requires the players to do a lot of bit of organising, getting in touch with their contacts, mechanical or otherwise, to find out more about the owners of the building itself, etc. and so forth, which is cool, but it requires a lot of fucking legwork from the games master to set all this up for them, because it really just sort of throws them in the fucking deep end with that, which means that the games master has really got to go into some distance to make it make sense somehow. And on top of all the descriptions of the contacts, the backgrounds and everything else that I alluded to a moment ago that's not presented on their character sheets, all that is presented on the notes section of each is role-playing advice, which is listed as not required, but they're key components of the character, so I think it is pretty required. And it's down to the player to play up or play down as much as narratively appropriate, I feel. So they do all of that, they do all the organising and stuff, which admittedly is going to be pretty limited, because everybody with a combined IQ of 10 is going to know that the best place to do the raid, as it were, is at night. And if vampires, well, that's your only fucking option, because, you know, vampires have got that whole thing against sunlight. You then go to the building and they stake it out, and this is where it gets really fucking boring, because in essence this one-shot adventure is basically an inverted dungeon crawl. So rather than going down a dungeon to slay what's inside, you're going up a tower, fight the big bad and the rival Splat that are always one step ahead of you apparently, claim the artifact and then escape. That's basically it, which is very disappointing really. There's no big twists or reveals, it's all very by the books. The booklet is divided up into chapters. The first part is like getting into the tower, and like, I'm going to call it a tower because it could be a fucking anything you want to. And each floor has an encounter, so it's not like a D10 random encounter for each of them, so there would be a bit of variety there. No, it's literally one encounter per floor. And then again, it requires the work of the games master to add and take bits away and to really get creative with shit, which I find really frustrating, because as a games master they do quite a lot anyway, so don't make it even more difficult for the games master, for fuck's sake. The second part is the encounter on the rooftop, which can be circumvented if the players find the fucking fire exit around the side of the building, which isn't too difficult to do. So really this adventure could be cut down by quite a lot. The players do the appropriate rolls and just get a lot of successes, which is an interesting choice, good or bad. You know, it can just shorten the play time by a considerable amount. But the encounter on the roof is nothing spectacular. Again, it's via the book sort of thing. They can either try and steal it from their person or convince them to hand it over, but if they try and convince them, that's a difficulty 6, which in 5th edition is insanely difficult, because it works a little differently to older editions where, depending on the number of successes that you get, is how well you do with the thing. But with 5th edition, it's you have to meet a certain number of successes. So when I say it's difficulty 6, the player must get 6 successes. There's obviously, like, you succeed at a cost, but that is still quite a lot they have to try and work up for. Which, yeah, it's ridiculous, I feel. And then you have the big old fight, and then you escape, and that's basically it, really. And the reason why I think it's bland is not just so much because of, you know, by the book nature, because, you know, for a convention that works sometimes, but it's the fact it doesn't really fit either Splat. It's just so painfully generic. Like, it doesn't feel like Vampire the Masquerade, and it certainly does not feel like Werewolf the Apocalypse. I suppose the only thing that makes it feel like Vampire is the fact it's all stealthy and sneaky, you're just like pretending to be something that you're not, and it's sort of in the city. Or a city-like environment, although if the players really want it, once they cleared out the building, they can get the building for themselves, which definitely has its perks of vampires as like a fat haven, or the Garou could like do something useful with that, but it's just bland. Like, if they had gone out of their way and made this into a chronicle, or they found a better way to integrate the two of them to have themes and emotions and ideas that represented both or either the Splat well, depending on which one you're playing, that would have been really cool, even if it's with the 5th edition werewolf stuff that I don't like, and some of the more general directions of 5th edition vampire that I don't like. I could at least say that it fell very much within that setting, and that could be applauded, but it isn't. It's just, you go after a cult and the inverse Splat to what you're doing. they're just another MacGuffin to go and fight. It could have been applauded, like turning this into a chronicle where, like Under a Blood Red Moon, where the fucking title is deliberately drawing influence from, that the crossover element is clearly drawing influence from. Like, if I was doing this, if I was tasked to do something like this with the same sort of scenario, what would I do? Well, it would revolve around a cult, obviously, because that's what's going on here. They've got the magical MacGuffin, and I don't know what entirely I would do with that. Like, I like the Bane idea that's presented with Werewolf, obviously, as I've mentioned, but I would play around with the system and, like, give a bit of creative freedom. Like, if you've got Werewolf the Apocalypse, it does this sort of thing. If it's Vampire, it does that sort of thing. But the general damage output is going to be the same, so even if you just wanted to be, like, a really powerful magical dagger that deals, like, aggravated damage, then players and games masters can do that, so they can play around with the system if they want to with the tools provided, but it can just be like a really powerful weapon. So regardless of experience level, any and everyone would be able to use it. And I would try to limit it to the core books, so the games master didn't feel that they had to go out and buy everything, even though there is the inherent issue is probably the wrong word here, given the fact that most storytellers / games masters are going to be partaking in something like this are going to have all the fucking books at their possession. So, that's what I'd do anyway. I'd just make things as simple as possible so it can just flow as easily as possible in the game. As for the plot itself, I would do something very simple, just have a vampire and a werewolf in cahoots with each other. They've created this artifact, would be a dagger, scepter, sphere, whatever you want to fucking call it. It could be a member of the Sabbat and a background dancer, it could be, I don't know, there's like a cult element of it. It could be a Hakata and a Shadow Lord, just a little callback to that legacy stuff, I guess. Not specifically those two clans, but the Shadow Lords are the tribe of Wales that are traditionally, alongside the Bone Gnawers and Glasswalkers, that have some interaction with vampires, but I feel the Shadow Lord will do something a bit sneaky here, and each of these two vampires have got their own goals. Maybe they're going to pit each other against each other, but the important thing is that they've worked together to obtain, acquire, create this sort of artifact. And in the vampire side, they are approached by an anonymous party whose sires or something owes this vampire a favour, or at least they claim it, and they can make up a boon, or it can be legitimate, and they're going to let the players be a bit creative with the character concepts that are provided to them. They have to go and help them set up the scene, or maybe they even have to go and find the thing itself. Like, they just need one final piece just to make it better, or have to find a building, to partake in the ritual sort of thing. They set things up, and the players bit by bit realise that, oh shit, this is a cult, we need to get out of here, or maybe they partake in it, and that just can be completely down to them, and they can weigh the pros and cons for each, depending on their own morals and what they've done with the character concepts, and whatever ideas are provided in the little notes section, of course. Now, then the werewolves turn up, and the players can try and convince the Garou, as difficult as it would be, what's going on, or they can fight to the death or flee, which gives some agency then, and depending on the sides they've taken, they get appropriate rewards. Now, on the Garou side of things, I think the plot would follow a fairly similar format, but it could be under the guise of, oh, we have learnt this very dangerous Shadow Lord who's betrayed us, or we've tried to locate somebody and we can't find him. The players do a bit of research, track him down to this building, find out that the vampires are there, this cult and whatever, and they have at it. Now, the dire choice here, like the bad option here, is that they learn about the Shadow Lord, and it could be like somebody that they trust that's helped them out with this, or somebody that set them on this task, to do X, Y, and Z. And then the players could use this dark weapon against its creator. So they have the bad option there, or as a form of punishment, depending on what I would decide this particular sphere would do. So yeah, in this particular example, the vampires clearly have more to do here, because I'm just shifting the focus because I'm a more vampire person than Werewolf the Apocalypse, even though we've talked quite a bit about Werewolf the Apocalypse recently. But also do keep in mind that I haven't actually given this much thought other than what I have been spewing much now. So maybe if I sat down and worked things through and actually wrote something like this, I could come up with an idea that could have the Garou do something a bit more useful. Or, and then had a cross-play idea where running these two separate games, the players of both splats would meet and talk and try and find out a solution that I couldn't possibly cover. But at least what I've presented here presents a variation of this where it makes sense for the two to interact with each other, and it provides a different spin on things. One is like inadvertently helping things out and may destroy it, whilst the other is going in to destroy it but then end up may doing something problematic. You know, as I said, I'm just spewing things as I am walking my dog. Like, this isn't meant to be like any masterpiece, and I'm just sort of working within the boundaries that have been set by this adventure, which I think is a bit more engaging. It knits the two worlds together rather than just being an inverted dungeon crawl that really doesn't have any differences beyond a magical artifact that doesn't make a lot of sense regardless to which splat that you're using. And I just think that's a real shame, because, you know, this is the first adventure that's come out of Play Renegade sort of thing under the new White Wolf brand, you know, that's supposed to be bringing lore back and connecting the worlds properly. And you just don't have much of anything. It's literally a fucking World of Darkness dungeon crawl, which is an antithesis to both. Even at the most stereotypical, like, Werewolf the Apocalypse, the most combat heavy, we've talked about before, Werewolf is not a D&D reskin, and certainly Vampire the Masquerade is not either. Another thing that's just really frustrating about this is that throughout the history of the World of Darkness, the Garou and the vampires have been mortal enemies of each other. I mean, you know, just to look back at the War of Chicago, like the Garou invading Chicago, like, or invading's the wrong word, they're wanting to cleanse Chicago of the influences of the worm, because certain MacGuffin things have happened, and there's a whole fucking calendar that you have to deal with as well. Like, calendars, again, the wrong word, like a whole timings and what's happening on each day / night. It's very important for that scenario to run smoothly, even with the other two ideas, and that could have been incorporated into this as well. Like, if you had a proper X and Y sort of thing going on, the Garou may know about the ritual a bit more, and they could be like working towards a time to certain things happening. And with the vampire end of things, the person who's like calling the shots, like pushing the players along to do sort of things. But, you know, the two have been at each other's throats since the beginning, and the fact that you have this adventure that doesn't really acknowledge that, other than, oh, you fight the other one. And I forgot to mention it earlier on, the stats to the opposite splat, they have power equivalents. So if you're using Werewolves of Vampire the Masquerade, it has discipline equivalents. But I believe also that it has the actual stats for Werewolves, so if you have that, you can just use those in its stead, which is good. I'm very glad that they did that. But it's not really making great use of the settings of either, to be honest. And then again, their hatred for each other isn't acknowledged all that much, especially with Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition. And it's not the only vampire werewolf crossover out there. I mean, the Chicago one that I mentioned, and Chicago by Night in general. But you have the old book Dark Alliance Vancouver, which actually has them working together, as heated as that is, you know, to do shit. And I don't actually know much about that book, to be honest. And I originally was able to purchase it alongside Rage Across Australia. It's like the Rage Across the World volumes that you can buy, second hand obviously. But I actually want to explore like the cross-play element of this more. There's an idea that my partner gave me, like, would you be interested if not only that I gave a review on both Under a Blood Red Moon and Dark Alliance Vancouver, that I actually ran the former for you lot? As Garou players, as vampire players, would you be interested in me doing a review for Dark Alliance Vancouver? And, you know, who knows, just running a short little thing there, and if it's got an adventure in there, which, as of the recording of this, I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what you lot think about that, and see how you could take ideas from both these ideas and just create something unique. Because I understand one of these books is a lot better than the other. You can tell me which one is which in the comments below. And once we've explored all that, we can put all these videos, including this one, as like a mega cut sort of thing, and we can just talk about the werewolf and vampire crossover potential. But that's sort of the idea that I've been brewing on, and sort of the idea that my partner is sort of inspiring me to do. Let me know if that's something that you'd all be interested in the comments below. How have you used Garou in your vampire games, and vampires in your werewolf games? Have you done crossplay between the two of them? So one set is Garou, another set is vampires. Let me know all these things in the description below, comments below, and how you would encourage players to take on this Herculean task. so we can try and do something useful rather than the shit I've just been waffling about. I'm also going to leave some Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse books for you to go and purchase, so you can actually start doing some crossover stuff if you wish. I'm not going to include changing under a changing moon, whatever the fucking thing's called, not because I'm being petty or anything, but as I said at the beginning of the video, this is something that's handed out to those who are partaking in the Play Renegade scheme. So unless you've got friends in cool places like I do, then you're not going to be able to get your hands on this unless you sign up for that. So if you want it, go and do that and start running these sort of games in your local game stores, online conventions and other things of that nature. There's a whole fucking site and form you fill out, so go and check that out. But to go back to the books that I've mentioned in the description below and the ones I've mentioned in this video, other than the PDF I've just been waffling about, if you purchase those specific books or those specific links in the description below, I get some of the money back because I'm an affiliate on Drive-Thru-RPG, and that sort of financial support helps to support videos like this where I go out of my way and buy older books to look through, play through, and give you a lot of fun time. So that's a lot of fucking free content that you're all getting at my expense, so anything you can do to help me towards that would be absolutely poggers based shit. But if you've got those books or just don't like them but want to buy something else to financially support me, you can do that by copying and pasting the affiliate code in the description below to purchase a book in Drive-Thru-RPG, the Storyteller's Vault and sister sites like that. Copy that into the URL before you add said book into your basket, and that allows me to get some of that coinage that way as well, which would be absolutely fantastic. But if you can't do that, I absolutely understand that. Times are hard and all of that, and you know, things are just getting more difficult to get your hands on, legally of course. I'm not encouraging you to do things illegally, but you know, I understand why people may easily turn to do that. But if you can do that, that's absolutely fine. But if you can't, that's also fine. But what you should definitely do regardless is let me know in the comments below if you would like me to run some Werewolf the Apocalypse for you and to see how these crossover books actually work in like some various videos for you. Give the video a little cheeky little thumbs up, subscribe to the Lore by Night channel, and share this video with any and everyone who loves what I do. And I'll see you on the next upload, whatever that may well be for you. And until next time, farewell.